Welcome to Everlutionary, a podcast about how we can restore balance and heal the world. Every episode of my show, we explore the future of humanity and how we've gotten to where we are today. Through inspirational stories about healing, science, and mysticism, we'll see how we can reshape our society to create a world free of violence. I'm your host, Hawah Kasat. Peace, peace, peace. Welcome back, my friends, to another episode of Everlutionary. I'm your host, Hawah Kasat, and today I'm flying solo, and I'm reflecting today on the idea of destiny. How can we know and understand when something is in our control, and how can we know and understand when something is not in our control? The idea of destiny is one many of us grapple with, sometimes without even realizing the friction it has in our lives. Some people believe that destiny is already written and we're simply playing out our part in a story that was predetermined, while others believe that every day we are making decisions that change our trajectory. In this episode, I'm going to peel back some of this to give you a perspective on empowerment that may change how you engage and interact with the world. Many people believe that nothing is in our control and that everything that happens in our lives is part of a larger omniscient will, a predetermined force or fate that's controlling everything for us or has already written everything down. Then there are those in the world who believe that humans are actually designing and responsible for everything that's happening to us, and that everything that happens is either our fault or because of our hard work. I think both of these views lack an understanding of how environmental and situational things happening in our lives are not in our control. For example, some people are born into situations where they are running downhill, and others are born into situations where they're running uphill. If you're born into a country that's more industrialized and modernized, or you're born into a family that has more affluence and wealth, then in many ways you are running downhill and have fewer obstacles in your path to material success. While if you're born into a country that is wrought with poverty, unemployment, or if you're born into a family that doesn't own their home and is living paycheck to paycheck, then you're running uphill. Attending college in this case might be much harder. Having the stability of buying and owning your own home also might be much harder. These life situations are real, and they're not to be ignored. And I preface my reflections today by acknowledging that many people face harder and more difficult obstacles in their paths to experiencing physical and psychological safety, optimal health and wellness, various educational opportunities, and so forth. Because of this reality, I don't fall into either of the extreme positions of believing that nothing is in our control or that everything is in our control. I feel that there's a balance and middle ground between both extreme viewpoints. And that's what I want to get into with you today. Now, have you ever heard someone say this or something like this before? Yeah, I guess the universe just didn't want it to happen. Or maybe you've heard, the universe just doesn't want me to do that right now. Or maybe, hey, I guess the universe just has different plans for me. For sure, when we're working really hard to try and make something happen, we need to listen to the environment. When we're trying to run a race with strong winds coming in from the front, we may want to take a break in that moment and rest. And then when the headwind dies down, we can start running again. Or we can wait until we have some wind at our backs, and then we can start running. And it shows we're paying attention to the environment around us. That's what I call wisdom. We need to be receptive to the signs around us And through deep listening, know when to get up and start running and when we need to just wait something out until the environmental conditions have improved, and then we can start running again. Let me break this down a little further. Imagine that you're on a sailboat and you are passing and floating across a lake. Now, on this sailboat, you have control of a few things. You have control of the rudder, which is at the back of the boat and acts like the steering wheel of a car. You can motivate and you can adjust and move the sail, and you can position it into different angles and degrees. By moving the sail left or right, up or down, you can indeed catch more or less wind. If there are multiple passengers on the sailboat, you can even position yourselves to balance the weight between the left and the right side of the boat. By moving over to one side or the other side, you can prevent the boat from tipping over and capsizing. So you are in control of a few things here on your sailboat. But then there are multiple things that you're not in control of. One of them is the wind. It's moving all the time, and sometimes it's not moving at all. And sometimes we might mistake our understanding of why things happen or don't happen as just the wind deemed it so. Of course, wind here is a metaphor, but there's a nuanced understanding here that the wind, even though it might be blowing 80 miles an hour or it's just blowing 5 miles an hour, the wind is not in our control. If there is absolutely no wind on a certain day, you probably will make the decision not to take the sailboat out onto the lake. But let's say there was wind, and then halfway through the day, the wind changes or it completely stops. Then you have to adjust the sails and change your steering. Sometimes you have to just hang out in the water currents and wait for some wind to pick back up so you can keep moving. If you're really lucky, you've got an engine and a motor on the back of your sailboat, and you can turn that on. So we have to ask some important questions in this situation. We got to ask, what direction is the wind blowing in from? It could be blowing in from the east. It could be blowing in from the west. That's not in our control. Sure, we could resolve and resign and say, oh, I guess I wasn't supposed to sail across the lake today because the universe didn't want me to. But another way to look at it, another perspective is to get in the sailboat and take some time and recast the sail. You can pivot the sail into a direction where it can catch the wind that is coming in, as hard or strong as that wind might be. And if you take the time to catch the wind, you can actually move in a direction that you choose to go in. You can change the direction you're traveling in by using the steering wheel and the rudder. It's an important idea here because sometimes we don't get that job, even after making it to the final interview round. And we might say to ourselves, oh man, I guess the universe just didn't want me to have that job. Or we might be driving somewhere to get to an event that's happening. Let's say you're driving to try to get to a soccer game and your car breaks down on the side of the road. You get a flat tire. We could say, oh, I guess I just wasn't supposed to be at that soccer game today. The universe didn't want me to be there. That's definitely one attitude you could have. But there's a different attitude you could also take. Maybe you could say to yourself, I got that flat tire, but let me get out of the car. Let me get into my trunk and pull out the spare and change my flat tire. Which are you going to choose? That is the question. Which are you going to choose? I remember one day when I was walking to the bus stop in Washington, D.C. It was a hot, humid morning, and I already had sweat appearing up on my forehead. I gazed down the block and I saw this familiar, half-tilted, faded metal bus stop sign. It was about a block away, and I was planning to catch the bus so I could get across town to get to a meeting. My phone said it was 8:26 a.m., and my bus was supposed to arrive at 8:30. In the distance, I saw an unorganized huddle of bodies near the bus stand. A few people were sitting on a wooden bench, staring out the plexiglass and the bus stop awning. I thought I was running ahead of schedule and figured I should have some time before the bus came and would just have a leisurely walk to the bus stop. A few seconds later, I hear the sound of big tires rolling up behind me. The big tires dipped into a small pothole. This is Washington, D.C., and yeah, we got potholes. I turn my head and I see the bus rolling up behind me, and there is no traffic to slow it down. Normally, I disdain traffic, and at this moment, I wished there were some cars backed up and some bumper-to-bumper traffic to slow this bus down. It's about 3 blocks away from the bus stop, and at this moment, I'm frozen and stuck between two fateful options. The first option is for me to stand there, and I could surrender my fate to the universe and say, oh, well, I guess the universe didn't want me to catch the bus today. I guess it just wasn't meant to happen. The second option before me was to take my bag, hold on to it a bit tighter, and start running up the block. This option doesn't guarantee that I catch the bus, but it engages me into the epic existential dance and delays my breathing in the exhaust of resignation. Contemplation on choice is sometimes the toughest part of any day. The universe definitely provided some context here to make it a bit harder for me to catch the bus. But still, I had the opportunity to act in that moment to change the situation. Sure, that bus came ahead of schedule, but my reaction is what is powerful and in my control. And what my practice has taught me, my mindfulness practice, my meditation practice, what these things have taught me is that there are some things that are not in our control. There's some things which are going to take place. There's collective climate events that are happening which bring forth hurricanes and tsunamis and earthquakes and wildfires. And I can't really control when a wildfire is going to be somewhere near where I'm living or visiting. But what I can control is the decision I make when I learn that there are certain stresses, certain situations, certain events that are taking place that will impact me and my behavior. My action at that moment, my thoughts, the clarity of my thoughts is what creates an intervention in the outcome. The universe just didn't want this to happen right now is a common bit of colloquial language that I hear. When we say that, however, we quickly fall into a trap in our ability to understand our sovereignty and our agency within an ever-changing universe. And even more importantly, we forget to remember a really deep and important existential and mystical truth that we are actually the universe. Now, that might sound a bit difficult to swallow, but many of our ancient Eastern philosophical traditions have a view of the world that teaches us that in our deepest nature and reality, we are that. In Sanskrit, the term is Tat Tvam Asi. I am that, and it is me. What is it that you are? You contain the entire potentiality of the entire universe. And separation is an illusion. When we become fully enlightened beings or self-realized, we discover that we are actually not separate from what is the will of the universe. We, me and you, are the will of the universe. If we have this realization on solely an intellectual level, it could cause us to lose our bearings and have our egos run wild and get disturbingly out of control. But this realization on a metaphysical, existential, and spiritual level actually is only possible with great humility. When we have the realization that we are in constant rhythm and dance with the forces of nature, that you yourself are actually a force of nature, and because you are a force of nature, there are winds inside of you. There is a rudder and steering wheel inside of you, which is in constant feedback and dialogue with the external environment. First, we shape the environment, and then the environment shapes us. Or you can think of it as first the environment shapes us, and then we shape the environment. But either way, it's a dialogue. It's a conversation. So in that moment, when you're about to just place the blame on the universe, or even full responsibility on a higher power for your destiny or fate, you can also pause and just think about what is in your control and what is not in your control. In some ways, you are responsible for what's happening to you. It is probably the result of thoughts, words, actions that you made in the past. And in some ways, you are not fully responsible for all that is happening to you. Those are from forces that are tethered to a complex expression of infinite forces that are all descending and manifesting in a moment that can actually never be planned for or anticipated. But the beauty of being human, the beauty of knowing that healing is something that happens naturally without us thinking about healing even happening, and that healing is something that happens also through conscious effort, desire, and work toward wanting to become whole again and regenerated. If we don't diffuse responsibility from the agency that we do have, then we take back some of our power in this play. And I'm not saying we have a ton of agency, but what I'm saying is we do have some agency. And so when we say, I guess it just wasn't meant to happen, I think we actually end up negating and disempowering ourselves. And so at this moment, with the bus zooming up towards the bus station and me being a block away, the other decision I can make is to lift my feet, pick up my heels, and start running. And each moment of life, we set into motion a series of succeeding moments that will ultimately shape our future. It's my choice to leave my destiny up to the universe, or I can choose to shift my thought and embrace the knowledge that I am the universe. In this way, destiny is actually something we understand as how we play the cards in our hand that we have been dealt. So it's true, you might have been dealt a bunch of cards, and the cards in your hand are not the greatest cards, and not the cards that you wish that you had been dealt. Honestly, that just sucks. When we're dealt a bad hand, we all feel it. However, how are you going to play the cards that you've been dealt? That's one of the biggest questions that I want to leave you with today, is the choice. Because we can make all the excuses we want, but in the end, destiny is part choice, and the future has not been fully written yet. Because if the future has already been written, then that means this moment right now is absolutely, completely meaningless. And I just don't subscribe to that ideology. I don't subscribe to that philosophy. And I actually believe that healing and transformation in the world does require us to consider how our day-to-day lives are always going to be impacted by things going our way and things not going our way. And when that happens, the question is not whether something happens to you was good or bad. The question is, how did you react? How did I react? How did we react to what happened to us? Things happen to us, and life is not about the things that happen to us as much as about how we respond while things are happening to us. That is what life is. And when we take back our power and we don't resign to just, oh, the universe wanted this to happen, or the universe didn't want me to get this, or the universe didn't want me to do this, as we understand that frame of thinking is part of an attitude and mentality that can become a self-fulfilling prophecy. And social justice and the work that lies ahead of healing and transforming the world, it does require us to be participants and players and to activate and use our voices, to get out there and advocate, to lobby, to volunteer, to run for your local school board office, to vote. All these things create impact. Even if small, they are needed and necessary for us to continue and reinvent and reshape the world. So although destiny is defined by many cultures and traditions as predetermined by an omniscient or divine will that has already mapped everything out for us, and in this perspective, we individually don't have any agency or say in anything, I'm actually drawn to a different story, a different definition of destiny that is also held by many cultures and traditions. These cultures and traditions see destiny as something that is shaped by both external forces and internal choices. I often ponder a blend of fate and free will, where certain aspects of life are not in our control or even are a result of past choices and decisions we made. And then what is spiritual progress and evolution is when we become conscious and aware and interrupt the typical habit patterns of our thoughts, words, and actions. This is how we dance and play with destiny. I hope you enjoyed episode 7 of Everlutionary. I drop a new episode every 2 weeks, and you can always know when that happens by hitting the subscribe, follow, and notification buttons on your podcast app. You can also set the episodes to automatically download. This way you can listen anytime from anywhere. If you're inspired, hit the rating button and drop a review, or simply share this podcast with some friends, colleagues, or family members by hitting the share button. All these little things help to take the podcast further out into the world by pushing on the algorithm. In an ironic way, to the theme of today's episode, it's how we can shape destiny. We need more community-driven voices in the world that are not owned by corporate interests. This podcast is commercial-free. It's all heart. Some episodes have guests, and some are just me alone. Go back and be sure to listen to previous episodes if you haven't already. We cover topics like radical love, belonging, survival of the kindest, and the philosophy, you are enough. Also, I have some deeper dive virtual and in-person immersive learning programming coming up. You can learn all about those opportunities by clicking on the link in the podcast description that takes you to my link tree. As always, spread love, be love, and build peace. We need you. We need us. Everlutionary, restoring balance and healing the natural world, is brought to you by me, Hawah Kasat. If you would like to find out more about me and my story, head to hawah.us. That's HAWAH.US. And then make sure to search for me in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or anywhere else podcasts are found. Make sure to click subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening. Stay in touch. Peace.